As we think about the importance of being a good neighbor, we turn to a scene where Jesus drops in on sisters, Mary and Martha, in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Now as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." This is the word of God for the people of God.
You may be seated. Thank you, Tracy. Won't you be my neighbor? That's what we've entitled this 6-week series. We're in week 3, and today we're talking about how we need to make the time to make that happen. And for the first 2 Sundays, we looked at Mr. Rogers' theme song from his neighborhood. Neighboring, specifically loving your neighbor as yourself, became Jesus' central theme when he was with us. And I go so far as to say that it became his strategy for changing the world. And Paul goes so far as to say in Galatians 5:14 that the whole law is summed up in this single command to love your neighbor as yourself. Yet we tend to make it pretty hard, even though it can actually be great fun. We just have to do it and let God bless us in the doing. How many of you recognize the name of Bob McGrath? Many of you grew up with him as you did Fred Rogers. He was part of the original cast of Sesame Street. And at age 84 today, he's still a part of it. And he had a theme song for all those years, and it was called "Who Are the People in Your Neighborhood?" It's the same question Jesus asks us. He would always bring in Bob 2 characters to help him with the song. So let's take a trip back to 1977 as he brings on stage with him a wisecracking lifeguard and a carpenter to help him sing the song, Who Are the People in My Neighborhood?
How would you like to meet some of the people around your neighborhood today? Oh, who are the people in your neighborhood? In your neighborhood, in your neighborhood. Say, who are the people in your neighborhood? The people that you meet each day. Well, here comes someone now. Hi there.
Hi.
Hey, you're kind of cute.
Thanks.
Hey, listen, let me ask you. I see you've got a little white hat and some sunglasses, swimming suit, and a
Smart.
little whistle.
Yeah.
You must be a lifeguard, eh?
Well, I guess you'd be safe in saying that.
Oh.
Hey, mind if I wave to everyone?
Wave, dive right in.
Okay. Oh, a lifeguard works out in the sun, watching over everyone. At the ocean, at the beach, or at the pool, I see that safety is the rule.
'Cause a lifeguard is a person in your neighborhood.
In your neighborhood.
She's in your
Neighborhood.
neighborhood. A lifeguard is a person in your neighborhood. A person that you meet each day.
Well, gotta go save some people.
Okay, well, here comes somebody else. Oh, excuse me, sir.
Yeah?
I see you have a hammer and a saw there. You must be a carpenter.
You hit the nail on the head.
Could I ask you a couple of questions about being a carpenter?
I wish you would.
Are you a good carpenter?
Never saw better.
Oh,
My wife this morning asked me to make the bed.
what's wrong with that?
I didn't have enough lumber. Oh, a carpenter is very good when it comes to hammers, nails, and wood. If you want to build a house, a porch, a chair, well, a carpenter can help you there.
'Cause a carpenter's a person in your neighborhood.
In your neighborhood.
He's in your neighborhood.
And the lifeguard is a person in your neighborhood.
They're the people that you meet
When you're walking down the street, they're the people that you meet each day.
So he would have a teacher and a nurse and a dentist and a bus driver and a firefighter and a doctor, a postman, a cable guy. Remember the elevator operator. That would be a part of the neighborhood if you went far enough back. The challenge for us today is that there are so many challenges and distractions, a word Jesus uses today in the Mary and Martha story, that keep us from fulfilling this commandment. We've never been any more busy and consumed by the demands of our schedules than we are today. Busier and more consumed and distracted than when Bob McGrath sang that song in 1977. We're busier than when he sang it in 1987. Busier than when he sang it in 1997 and 2007. With each passing year, it seems to get harder and harder to make the time to get to know a neighbor you don't now know. Even just to know their name. But I want you to try to imagine with me how challenging it was for Mary and Martha 2,000 years ago to get to know, to be a neighbor, to get to know the stranger. In this case, to get to know a man of the cloth, a religious teacher, a rabbi who we now know was the Savior of the world, the long-awaited Messiah. Much of the reason that they had a hard time with this was because they were of the wrong gender. In fact, there was a great debate that was going on throughout Judaism during those days about the roles of women. Some rabbis would say it would be better to burn the Torah than to teach it to a woman. So some people of that day would have been aghast to see Mary sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to what he was saying. The duty of the first century Jewish woman was to help with the household chores. And Mary knew that. Some enlightened men of our day would probably say the same thing. But sitting at Jesus' feet, Mary was in essence acting as a man, taking the place of a disciple. So she was violating a crystal clear social boundary and bringing shame upon her house. And Martha knew that. You know, we're looking at this story through 21st century lens. We want to give Mary a thumbs up for her boldness, but I want you to think about how hard and risky it was for Mary back then, and then to think about how hard it is for us to come out of our kitchens, men and women, today. We have a deep desire to be neat and tidy and organized. We feel badly that our desks are overflowing with papers, that our closets are crammed full of clothes, and our garages and basements are packed with tools and toys and sports equipment and boxes of who knows what. People admire us as to how much we get accomplished, how we outwork the person next to us, how many activities we can fit into our kids' calendars. We think we're doing it for our own good, for our own success, and for the best upbringing of our kids. But how often will one of our children say to us, let's just stay home tonight and be together? I can remember when our two sons were younger and we would hurry to get them from one sporting event or one piano practice to another, and then we would rush over and grab a meal at McDonald's or at Wendy's. They would tell us over and over again that their best times were not when we were hurrying and eating out, but when we were slowing down and eating in. They loved just to be at the dinner table with us. And it's probably because we were able to, in that slowed down moment, tell stories that we couldn't tell otherwise. And some of the stories that they would tell were stories of trouble that they were having, and we could really listen and embrace them. Some of the stories were of great humor, and we could laugh hysterically and embrace them in a different way. Haven't you ever had people over and were almost frantic to get things just right, just as nice as possible, so that our guests, sometimes our family, would really enjoy themselves? And in the end, we might hear ourselves saying that we were so busy that being hospitable that we didn't get a chance to spend much time with the people that we had invited over. Being a good friend, a good family member, a good neighbor, a good disciple is finding that right balance between both doing and being Mary and Martha. Realizing that if you're going to shortchange one end, it's probably better to shortchange the Martha side than the Mary side. Because in the end, nobody really cares that much, do they? They want to be with you anyway. It's sad if they would walk away from your house when you were throwing a party and say, I really didn't get to spend any time with the host. I like Eugene Peterson's rendering of the story as he writes from verse 41 and 42 from the Message. He has Jesus saying it in this way. Martha, dear Martha, you're fussing far too much and getting yourself worked up over nothing. One thing only is essential, and Mary has chosen it. It's the main course and won't be taken from her. For me, the reason why I like this, calling what Mary did as the main course rather than as the better part, reminds me that all of our preparations are just for that, for the main course. When we miss not sitting at Jesus' feet or not following the greatest commandment, we haven't just missed the better part of life, we've missed the main course in life. And it's something that will never be taken away from us. Last Sunday, I gave you a homework assignment. I give it to you again this Sunday, to meet a neighbor you don't now know. And I reminded you of how intentional you have to be, because it's harder to do neighboring today than it was a generation or 2 generations ago. Now, I can remember back when I was 12 years old, I had a job working in the neighborhood grocery store. It was called the Ravenwood Market in Dayton, a half a block away from this duplex that was my house. I was paid under the table because I can remember the owner, he would give everybody their checks, but he would open the cash register and give me my earnings. And one of the things I did is I sorted pop bottles. Remember pop bottles? Empty pop bottles that you would return, and of course I would collect them in the alley too, because you would get so many cents per pop bottle. And then I learned which bottles went with the 7-Up company and which went with the Pepsi company and the Coke company and the Canada Dry company as they would come by. When I got a little older, I remember they would have me deliver groceries to neighbors within a walking distance. So I would take a sack full of groceries and I would deliver them. And then I would obviously engage with that neighbor. And when I was a little older, I got a job as a newspaper boy, and I had a newspaper route. It seems like that was just yesterday, but it was a long time ago. It was the Dayton Daily News. I delivered the evening paper. We had the Journal Herald in the morning, and you remember when we had 2 papers here in Columbus. 62 cents it would cost, 7 cents for the daily paper and 20 cents for the Sunday paper. And I had my little coin receptacle that I could make money with or make change with. But part of it was interacting with those neighbors, those people that were on my route, and we really got to be dear friends. Then I got into collecting. Do you remember top value stamps? So I'm taking you back a little ways. So you got those when you went shopping, and they were single ones or ones that were worth 10 points, and you would put them in these saver books. This next picture shows you a saver book. And then I can remember some of the neighbors would save stamps for me. My mother collected so many stamps at her place of work that she was able to buy together a English Racer 10-speed bicycle for me that I was able to use then for my next job at a neighborhood grocery store. We also collected S&H green stamps. You will remember those. And when I was in Boy Scouts, I got interested in stamp collecting. And I went to neighbors all over, and they would save their canceled stamps for me. And I would put those in books. Now, I say all this to you because that's why it was easier to do neighboring a generation or 2 generations ago, because you had all these opportunities to interact, and people opened up their life and their home in ways that they don't too. Remember, I was a city boy, so if you were a country boy, you did it in differing ways. But even though it may have been easier to get to know our neighbor back then, I think neighboring today, when you really do it, the satisfactions can maybe be just as great, if not greater, because it's almost like finding a hidden treasure when you get to know somebody that you wouldn't ordinarily get to know. So earlier this week, Diane had been doing daily babysitting, and she was home after a full day, and she was exhausted. And I said, honey, I've been trying to encourage people to go out and meet our neighbors. Would you mind going across the street? Here's a little bag of Brandstool peaches. That's what I've been doing. Would you mind going out and seeing if you could meet someone? She said, I'm so tired. But yes, I'll go out. So she went out, and she came back, and she was refreshed. She was on cloud 9. She had met this young couple named Mallory and Dwayne. Their house is perpendicular to our parsonage, and they have 2 kids, a 13-year-old Olivia and a 10-year-old Grace, and the kids are into gymnastics. The wife teaches special needs children in the junior high, so they were talking about this buddy walk that they were about for the Down Syndrome Association, and we were able to talk about how we have Down syndrome children come during the summer. We just did that for the whole month of July here. And she got to talk about the church, and I left. I had a business card I gave Diane with her name on the back. There's even a better card that we put in last week's bulletin that you could use, and they're right outside the sanctuary in the narthex if you want to take them. But the satisfaction was pronounced. And do you think that it's because when you reach out and love your neighbor as yourself, you're doing something that's pleasing to God? And maybe, just maybe, when you make the time today, because it requires more effort than years ago, it even heightens that sense of satisfaction. The New York Times, let me leave you with this, which may encourage you to kind of leave some things go for a little bit. They did an article recently that says, "Say yes to mess." And they found that recent studies, listen to this, indicate that messy desks are the marks of people with creative minds and higher salaries. That messy closet owners are probably better parents than their tidier counterparts. And that really neat people are often humorless and inflexible and not as great as they look. You don't have to agree with that, but at least their studies found it. And then I think of, as I've been preparing for these messages, I came across something that Barbara Bush said at a 1994 commencement to Wesley College. And you've heard something like this, but it's so beautiful. She says, as important as your obligation as a doctor, talking to these women might be, a lawyer or a business leader may be, your human connections with your spouse, your children and your friends, your neighbors, are the most important investment you will ever make. At the end of your life, you will never regret not having passed one more test, not winning one more verdict, or not closing one more deal. But you will regret time not spent with your spouse, your children, or your friends and your neighbors. She didn't realize she was quoting Jesus. And maybe that's why the great commandment is the great commandment, because it is life-changing, and it was Jesus' way to change the world. Go out this week. I'm asking you to tell me the stories, because I'd love to share with you what you'll find out as you open up a whole chapter in your life that you don't have right now. Amen.